Imagine you're sitting at your kitchen table. You've got a mortgage, a car payment, and maybe a few thousand in credit card debt. You're good for it, right? Now, imagine your bank calls and says your total debt is now 101% of everything you will earn this year, and next year, and the year after that. You aren't just living paycheck to paycheck, you are living in a house built of IOUs, and the foundation just cracked. In April 2026, the United States didn't just hit a number, it hit a wall. The national debt officially surpassed 100% of the gross domestic product, GDP. For the first time since the desperate days of World War II, the US government owes more than the entire country produces in a year. But this isn't 1945. There's no global victory in sight, and no post-war boom to save us. This is the era of the $31 trillion shadow. To understand why your grocery bill is still climbing and why your fixed mortgage feels heavier, you have to look at the federal ledger. In 2026, the math is brutal. For every $1 the government collects in taxes, it spends $1.33. That 33-cent gap is filled by borrowing that you, your children, and your local economy pay for through a hidden tax called interest. From a microeconomic perspective, the government is now your biggest competitor. When the Treasury needs to borrow $1.9 trillion this year alone to cover the deficit, they are sucking the oxygen out of the room. This is called crowding out. Every dollar a bank lends to the government is a dollar they aren't lending to a small business in your town or offering to you for a lower interest car loan. The low-rate dream of the 2010s is dead. As of early 2026, the average interest rate on federal debt has climbed to 3.35%, double what it was just a few years ago. That sounds small until you realize we are paying nearly $1 trillion a year just on interest. That is money not spent on infrastructure, not spent on lowering your taxes, and not spent on the services you rely on. It's dead money. For the viewer at home, this translates to a persistent floor under interest rates. You might be waiting for the Fed to drop rates so you can refinance, but the sheer volume of government borrowing is keeping the neutral rate higher than we've seen in a generation. While the headlines talk about trillions, your bank account talks in hundreds. The mortgage freeze, with the debt-to-GDP ratio at 101%, the risk-free rate of U.S. Treasuries stays elevated. This means 30-year mortgage rates aren't returning to the 3% or 4% levels. In 2026, the new normal of 6 to 7% is chilling the housing market, making your home, your biggest asset, harder to sell and more expensive to maintain. The credit card squeeze, as the government competes for capital, banks tighten their belts. Credit card delinquencies are ticking up toward 8.6%. The safety net is fraying because the cost of carrying the debt is no longer a minor nuisance, it's a major leak. You walk into a grocery store in mid-2026. You notice the price of eggs has finally stabilized, but your disposable income has vanished. Why? Because while the prices at the shelf stop sprinting, the costs of your life, insurance, utilities, and local taxes are in a marathon. You are living through the fiscal squeeze, where a debt-burdened nation stops investing in its people and starts merely servicing its past. In 2026, we hit a psychological milestone that experts have feared for decades. The U.S. government now spends more on interest payments than on its entire military. Think about that. We are paying more to the bank, which includes foreign nations like China and Japan, and domestic billionaires, than we are to defend our borders. From a micro perspective, this is the ultimate opportunity cost. For every citizen, this means the social contract is being rewritten. When the government is broke, it passes the buck to the states, and the states pass it to the cities. Your property taxes are rising not because your house is better, but because the federal subsidies for roads, schools, and healthcare are being eaten by the interest on the $31 trillion debt. There is a glimmer of hope in the 2026 data: generative AI. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, is banking on a massive spike in productivity to grow our way out of this hole. If AI can make a worker 20% more efficient, the GDP grows, and the debt-to-GDP ratio shrinks. But for you, the viewer, this creates a micro-dilemma. To save the macroeconomy, your job is being transformed. You are being asked to produce more, faster, with more technology, just to keep the national ship afloat. It is a race between technological salvation and fiscal collapse. Inflation in 2026 is sticky at 2.7%, but it feels higher because of tariffs. To try and bridge the $1.9 trillion deficit, the government has turned to aggressive trade duties. While they claim this taxes foreign countries, the microeconomic reality is that it's a consumption tax on you. The component cost, the smartphone in your pocket and the appliances in your kitchen are 10 to 15% more expensive because the government needs the revenue to pay the interest on the debt. The insurance spike, because the government has less fiscal space to help with disasters, private insurance premiums for homes and cars have skyrocketed by 20% in some regions. The finale of our story isn't a "the day after tomorrow" style collapse. It's a "the long winter." The US debt being bigger than the economy means the era of easy money is over. For the American consumer, the 2026 reality is a shift toward the new thrift. Success in this economy isn't about how much you can borrow, it's about how much you can own outright. As the nation struggles to balance its checkbook, the smartest microeconomic move for the individual is to decouple from the system, paying down personal debt, investing in tangible skills, and realizing that the government's 101% problem is a warning to get your own house in order. Let's stop talking about Washington for a second and talk about your kitchen table. When the national debt hits 100% of the economy, the government doesn't just owe money, they owe your future purchasing power. See, they have two ways to pay that interest. They can tax you directly, or they can tax you silently. The silent tax is the one you're feeling right now. It's called yield crowding. When the Treasury borrows trillions, they suck up all the cheap cash in the world. That's why your credit card interest is stuck at 22%, why your car loan feels like a second mortgage, and why that 3% home loan is a relic of the past. Every time the debt grows, the dollar in your pocket shrinks. You aren't imagining it. You're working harder just to stay in the same place because you're carrying the weight of a $31 trillion backpack you never asked for. In 2026, the debt isn't a headline. It's the hidden surcharge on every gallon of gas and every bag of groceries you buy. The government spent the money yesterday, but the bill? The bill is coming out of your pocket today.